it didn't really mean that much to me, but somebody said, you know, it mightn't seem like much now, but it is history.
The Beatles were always destined to become the world's favourite obsession. But while their music carved a path through the world's collective heart, the individual personalities behind the mop tops created stories just as captivating. If Paul was the affable charmer and John the acerbic provocateur, George Harrison was the most elusive, a man who wielded his guitar like a shield. Deflecting fame's blinding glare while quietly crafting some of the most profound music of the 20th century. Unlike the others, George didn't seek centre stage or revel in the headlines. He found his space in the margins, and it's there that much of his genius lies.
Well, yes, some of them are old Beatles songs. There's a couple that go back to from 1965, maybe one or two. There's some from all the different periods, 67, 69, 70, and right through all my solo albums.
Nowhere is this more apparent than when you try to piece together his favourite Beatles songs.
Baby said she's mine, she tells me all the time, she said.
George wasn't one for listicles or best of rankings. He rarely spoke of his own accomplishments within the band, let alone those of his bandmates. It wasn't false modesty or self-deprecation. It was more that George had moved on, both spiritually and artistically, from his years as a Beatle. The past is gone, the future may not come. The only thing you've got is now, he once said, summing up his philosophy with the kind of grounded wisdom that made him both infuriatingly enigmatic and deeply inspiring. Yet, every so often, he'd let slip a nugget of insight, a comment in passing, a reflective interview moment, a candid observation captured on tape. From these breadcrumbs, we can piece together a picture of the Beatles songs that resonated most with George. It's fitting to start with Rubber Soul, the album that George himself once described as my favourite. Released in 1965, Rubber Soul marked a turning point for the band. It was a moment when their music stepped away from the conventions of pop and began exploring deeper themes and more complex arrangements. For George, it was transformative. Even at that time, I think it was the best one we made, he said years later, reflecting on the album's importance. The most important thing about it was that we were suddenly hearing sounds we weren't able to hear before. Also, we were being more influenced by other people's music, and everything was blossoming at that time, including us. George's connection to Rubber Soul isn't hard to understand. It's the album where his own artistic voice began to truly emerge, most notably with his first Indian-influenced composition, Norwegian Wood. While the track was penned by John Lennon, it was George's sitar that gave it its distinctive flavour, a sound that would go on to define much of his later work. I felt where it was coming from, George said of the song, and you can sense that feeling in the way he plays. The sitar isn't an embellishment, it's an extension of the track's emotional core, a bridge between East and West that feels as fresh today as it did nearly 60 years ago. It was also the beginning of George's love affair with Indian music and culture, a relationship that would shape his identity far beyond his Beatles years. But Rubber Soul was just the beginning. As the band's music evolved, so did George's tastes, gravitating towards their more experimental and introspective work. One of his most cherished tracks was Strawberry Fields Forever, the psychedelic masterpiece that showcased Lennon's ability to translate his inner world into sound. For George, it wasn't about the hits or the crowd pleasers. He wasn't particularly interested in the early songs that made the band famous. What fascinated him were the moments when they pushed boundaries and defied expectations.
Strawberry fields forever. Well, let's record it all this afternoon now.
Strawberry Fields Forever was a perfect example of that, a song that was as much about its layered, dreamlike production as it was about its lyrics. It was music as art, and George respected that. In the same vein, he admired Eleanor Rigby, McCartney's haunting ballad from Revolver. The song's stark string quartet arrangement was unlike anything the band or anyone else in popular music had done before.
Ah, look at all the lonely people.
For George, it was the boldness of it that stood out. It wasn't just a song, it was a statement, a reminder that the Beatles were never content to rest on their laurels. They were always searching, always experimenting, always reaching for something new. That drive for innovation resonated deeply with George, whose own work often sought to transcend traditional boundaries. But George's appreciation for the Beatles wasn't limited to their grand artistic gestures. He also had a soft spot for their more understated moments, the songs that captured the simplicity and sincerity of their early years. One such track was Every Little Thing, a McCartney-penned number from Beatles for Sale.
Every little thing she does.
It wasn't a chart-topping hit or a groundbreaking piece of music, but for George it held a certain charm. During the Get Back sessions, as the band grappled with rising tensions and the weight of their collective success, George referred to the song as a good one. Watching the band revisit it in the studio, you get a sense of the camaraderie that once defined them, a fleeting glimpse of the joy that brought them together in the first place. The same joy is evident in George's fondness for This Boy, the B-side to I Want to Hold Your Hand. Released in 1963, it's a song that showcases the band's early mastery of three-part harmony, a skill that often goes overlooked in discussions of their greatness. In later years, George was captured on film watching a clip of the band performing This Boy, and his reaction is priceless. Smiling like a proud parent, he joins in on the harmonies before turning to the camera and declaring, "It's a good song though, a good song."
Good song though. Bad song.
It's a rare moment of unguarded nostalgia from a man who usually avoided looking back, and it speaks to the enduring power of the music they created together. Of course, no discussion of George's favourite Beatles songs would be complete without mentioning Abbey Road, the band's final studio album and a masterpiece in its own right.
Something in the way she woos me.
While some of George's praise for the album can be attributed to the timing, he made these comments shortly after its release, it's clear that certain tracks genuinely resonated with him. One such track was She Came In Through the Bathroom Window.
She came in through the bathroom window.
Part of the iconic medley that closes the album. A very good song of Paul's with great lyrics, George said, summing it up with his trademark economy of words. He was equally effusive about Golden Slumbers.
It's an old English folks word, these. Smiles await you when you arrive.
Another McCartney-led track that he described as very melodic, but it was Because that inspired George's highest praise. Featuring intricate three-part harmonies and a lush, ethereal arrangement, it's a song that feels almost otherworldly. One of the most beautiful things we've ever done, George said of the track, and it's hard to disagree.
'Cause the world is round, it turns me on.
There's a purity to it, a sense of transcendence that captures the essence of what made the Beatles so extraordinary. It's music that feels timeless, and George's appreciation for it speaks volumes about his own artistic sensibilities. Another track from Abbey Road that held a special place in George's heart was I Want You, a bluesy, almost hypnotic composition by Lennon. This is good because the riff he plays is basically a blues part. The middle bit is great, George said, highlighting the song's raw intensity.
I need you. I need you so bad. I need you. I need you so
It's a track that stands in stark contrast to the polished perfection of Because, yet both are equally compelling, a testament to the band's versatility and George's open-mindedness. Perhaps the most telling example of George's relationship with the Beatles' music is his connection to In My Life. Written by Lennon, it's one of the most introspective and heartfelt songs in the band's catalogue. During his 1974 tour, George performed the song alongside his own material, making it the only Lennon-McCartney composition he included in his setlist. For a man who spent much of his post-Beatles life distancing himself from the band's legacy,
I don't really remember anything about the Beatle days. It seems like a sort of, previous incarnation when I think about it.
that choice feels significant. It's as if the song served as a bridge between his past and present, a reminder of where he came from and the people who helped him get there. George Harrison's relationship with the Beatles was, like all great relationships, complicated. He often spoke of the challenges of being overshadowed by the Lennon-McCartney partnership, the struggle to have his voice heard in a band that was dominated by two larger-than-life personalities.
Over the years, I had such a lot of songs mounting up that I really wanted to do, but I only got my quota of 1 or 2 tunes per album. Mm-hmm. And that way I would have had to have recorded about 100 Beatle albums just to get out the tunes I had in 1965.
Were you held down by the other fellas?
Well, very subtly, yes.
And yet, there's no bitterness in the way he talks about their music. If anything, there's a quiet reverence, a recognition of the magic they created together. The past is gone, he said, and you believe him. But even so, the past has a way of lingering, and for George, it lingered in the songs that inspired him, challenged him, and in some cases, defined him. Piecing together George Harrison's favourite Beatles songs is like assembling a puzzle with half the pieces missing. You'll never get the full picture, but what you do see is something extraordinary. A portrait of an artist who was always looking forward, even as he acknowledged the brilliance of what he left behind. For George, the music wasn't about fame or fortune or even legacy. It was about connection, about capturing a moment in time and sharing it with the world. And in that sense, his favourites say as much about him as they do about the songs themselves. They're a reminder of what made George Harrison and the Beatles truly unforgettable.